He died, gunshot wound in the brain.
They fade out the part where he points to his head.
You have the film in your camera. We'll try
I brought it on the studio.
We'll try to get that processed and have it as soon as possible. Right?
Gunshot apparently from behind us hit the president in the side of the temple.
Would it have been possible for him to have been struck by a bullet in the right temple?
He was shot in the right temple.
Please notice the ABC logo. This is from Jennings' video.
He died, gunshot wound in the brain.
And they fade the scene out. No more press conference. But now watch this. The same guy, the same press conference, no ABC logo.
Died at approximately 1 o'clock Central Standard Time today here in Dallas. He died, gunshot wound in the brain. Dr. Berkeley told me it's a simple matter, Tom, of a bullet right through the head.
The press secretary tried to show us how the head wound was inflicted, but Jennings cut that out.
Presidential press assistant Malcolm Kilduff held a press briefing and made the announcement that the president was officially dead. He also explained the seating arrangement in the automobile in which the president had taken part in the motorcade along with Governor and Mrs. John Connally.
Where's the pointing to the head that you see in other news?
The Secret Service, 2 Secret Service men in front.
Footage.
The Connollys in the middle, President and Mrs. Kennedy in the rear.
Did Dan Rather and the crew edit that out like Peter Jennings?
Sitting on the right-hand side as you looked onto that car from the top side.
If so, why?
The shot apparently was fired from about 1 block away from what is believed to have been a .30 caliber weapon. The crowd outside the hospital got larger about the time the presidential party and the body of President Kennedy left Dallas's Parkland Hospital. Police continued to stand guard over the convertible which had brought the blood-splattered Mr. Kennedy and Mr. Connally to the hospital.
Why don't they want him to see the car?
The latest word on Governor Connally is that he is in serious but not critical condition.
Would that show evidence of multiple gunshot impact
to
bullets?
some members of the crowd that they have to get further back.
And this, when I got my leg to about this position, a man came around the corner off the bridge, had a suit on, and he turned around and he told me that I wasn't going to be there. And I guess I was younger and more spunky at that time because I told him, you and who else is going to keep me off the bridge? And he pulled out an identification card and he said, I'm with the CIA. And I said, well, that's enough muscle. I'll leave. So I turned around and I brought my leg back over like this. I walked down the fence line here about halfway. And I was looking over the fence to see if I could get a good shot of the parade. And he come back up and he told me, he says, I told you to get out of this area. And I said, okay. So I walked the complete length of the fence, got around on the other side. That's when I started to line up my frame so that I could take the picture of the parade. I had been panning shots through here so that I could get whatever was going to come down the street. And I saw that it was the President of the United States. And as I was panning down this direction, just as I got to about this position, a shot come right past my left ear. And that meant it would have had to have come from this direction. And that's when I fell down. And to me, it seemed like a second shot was at least fired over my head. There's a bunch of report going on in this particular area at that time. And what happened was that while I was laying on the ground, it seemed like a gentleman came from this particular direction. And I thought it was a police officer because he had a uniform of a police officer. But he didn't wear a hat. And he... And literally what the man did was kick me and asked me if I was taking a picture. I told him that I was. And when I looked at the weapon, it was about that big around, and I decided I'd let him go ahead and have the film.
Emergency room exit, and the presidential limousine was there. Had been staying there for some time, just watching the back of the emergency room, when I realized that there was a bullet hole in the windshield. Talked to my friend next to me and said, "Look, there's a bullet hole in the windshield," and pointed it out to them. At the time, I did not know any of the details of the shooting. I was quite shocked when I looked up and saw the bullet hole. But it was very clear. It was a through and through bullet hole through the windshield of the car from the front to the back. I don't believe there's even any cracks associated with that bullet hole. It seemed like a high velocity bullet that had penetrated from front to back in that glass pane. At which point a security officer of some type raced forward and jumped in the limousine and drove it off, even as I was leaning against it, to an area back of us somewhere. And that was the last time I saw the limousine.
The Secret Service made certain no authority in Dallas had an opportunity to examine the bullet damage to Kennedy's car.
In all these years, there has not been a single piece of credible evidence to prove a conspiracy.
In fact, 100% of the medical personnel in Dallas who saw the president's wounds described a large exit wound in the back of Kennedy's head about this size and location. Virtually all the witnesses near the grassy knoll say they heard a shot from that direction, and dozens of them chased after the gunman who fired that shot. Congress hired acoustic experts to analyze the sounds of a tape recording of the assassination. Their report was decisive and powerful.
With a probability of 95% or better, there was indeed a shot fired from the grassy knoll.
And Jennings' response to this mountain of proof is,
in all these years, there has not been a single piece of credible evidence to prove a conspiracy.
This is the first shot, followed by the second shot, and continuing the third. The sounds of the fourth and fifth were almost simultaneous and difficult to verify. The type of waves demonstrated by the two nearly simultaneous shots doubled is similar to the combination of the first two shots. In the first, second, and third shots, each of the waves are very different.
There was two falling shots, just like a pow, pow.
3 or 4 real close together.
Then I heard another shot or two. I couldn't say what it was, 1 or 2. And I saw his head practically open up.
I noticed a mark on the curb, a very fresh mark.
The FBI sends some agents from Dallas, and they file a report that says there's no mark there. It must have been eradicated by the brushes using to sweep the streets. They have no questions about why would somebody want to hide this when the president is killed. And then they destroyed the spectrographic plate when I asked for it. At least they say they did.